Ah, the quiet stillness of the countryside, a place where life feels eternal and unchanging. The rolling hills were dotted with farms, and at their edge sat an old monastery. Most people in the village paid little attention to the monks who lived there, seeing them as little more than reminders of a way of life disconnected from the toil of planting and harvesting. But for one farmer, Nima, that old monastery had become a source of curiosity he couldn't seem to shake. Nima was a man of action. From sunrise to sunset, his life revolved around hard work, plowing fields, tending to crops, feeding animals. There was no room in his world for stillness. "What is the point of sitting still all day?" he'd mutter to himself while passing the monastery. Yet, deep down, he couldn't ignore the air of calm that seemed to surround the monks. It wasn't anything they said or did. Most of them barely spoke at all, but their presence was undeniable. One day, curiosity got the best of him. As purple dusk blanketed the sky, Nima finished his chores and began the climb to the monastery. He had no plan, no idea what he hoped to find, but perhaps he thought they might teach him their secrets, whatever it was that made life feel so quiet for them. At the monastery's entrance stood an old monk named Sewang, his robes threadbare, his sandals worn, and his face weathered by time, yet he carried himself with a grace that defied his age. He spotted Nima and smiled gently, as though he had been expecting him. "What brings you here, my friend?" Sewang asked, his voice as calm as a breeze stirring the leaves. Nima scratched the back of his neck, hesitant. "I don't really know," he admitted. "I suppose I wanted to understand how people who don't work seem so peaceful." Sewang chuckled softly. "Ah, but there is much work done here. It is the kind of work that cannot be seen, the work of the mind." "The mind?" Nima raised an eyebrow. "What kind of work is that supposed to be?" "Sit with me," Sewang said, lowering himself onto the steps of the monastery. "Let me show you." The farmer hesitated but eventually lowered his tired body beside Sewang. The monk instructed him to close his eyes just for a moment and focus on his breath. "In through the nose, out through the mouth," Sewang whispered. "No need to change it, no need to force it. Simply notice it." Nima shifted uncomfortably on the stone step. Each breath felt strange, like an impossible task. His thoughts swirled uncontrollably, lists of chores, memories of his late wife, worries about the coming winter. "This is pointless," he growled, opening his eyes. Sewang placed a hand on Nima's shoulder, steadying him. "Ah, the work of the mind is like taming a wild horse. At first it resists, but with patience it begins to calm. Now, close your eyes again." Reluctantly, Nima obeyed. This time, instead of fighting his thoughts, he tried to let them pass, like clouds drifting through the sky. He began to notice something startling, a small gap between one thought and the next. It was fleeting, but it was there, a moment of silence. "What was that?" Nima asked, his voice trembling slightly. "That," Sewang said with a knowing smile, "is the space between the noise. All things, even your restless mind, carry moments of stillness. When we begin to listen to them, the power of meditation unfolds." Over the coming weeks, Nima returned to the monastery each evening, sitting on those old stone steps to meditate alongside Sewang. At first, his mind was stubborn as a mule, wandering endlessly, but slowly he discovered a rhythm, a stillness deeper than any sound. He carried this stillness back to his farm, watching as his work felt less hurried, less burdensome. For the first time in years, he noticed the song of the birds in his fields and the way sunlight warmed his skin. One day, as he stood overlooking his land, the realization hit him like a wave. The work he did with his hands, the plowing, planting, harvesting, was no different than the work he did with his mind. The stillness he had learned from meditation flowed into the soil, into the crops, into the very essence of his life. When Nima returned to the monastery that evening, he didn't have questions or doubts. He simply sat beside Sewang, breathing in and out, letting the quiet fill the space around them. The farmer was no longer trying to understand meditation. He had come to feel it, to live it. And in that moment, he understood the secret those monks carried. The power of meditation wasn't something that could be taught or explained. It was something that grew slowly and steadily, like the farmer's wheat, nurtured by attention, harvested with patience, and nourishing in ways that words could never fully describe.